So first of all, I will like to start and make sure that now when we have sound, can everybody really hear me? Like people in the back, try to raise your hand if you do. Great. So now that I know that you can raise your hand, if you have any questions, please do use that. And I'd start first of all by saying thank you. I wouldn't be here if I didn't get a friendly nudge from Marit. So pretty excited to be here. And let's start talking a little bit about threat modeling. Threat modeling basically started for me like 3 years ago when I was tasked with doing that at my company, 3, 2, something like that. And I had no idea what does it mean. It's really scary, really technical security people stuff. And then I got a book from a colleague. The book was called Threat Modeling, Designing from Security by a guy from Microsoft called Adam Shostak. And going through this book made me realize that most of the stuff there I already knew, and they were much similar to what I was already doing. So I wanted to share this with you, and maybe start with a little story that you might be familiar with. It's about a development company, doesn't really matter which. They had a great idea, and they started building an application. And as it all goes, everyone was very excited, and then they said, okay, we're done. Let's call in a tester and see let's add some quality into it. So how many of you think it's actually a good idea to do that? Okay, I see one. Definitely better than not doing it. Only, oh, sorry, I didn't mean a tester. I meant a security expert. Now you're familiar with that, right? Like, you always go and at the end, someone calls, let's do some security testing by the experts. And really, there isn't any real chance that it will work any better than with regular testing. So the question is always, how do we incorporate security earlier in our software development lifecycle, as they say that? And also, how do we do that when there are not enough security-savvy people? Like testers, you get at least a tester per team most of the time. I mean, there are some that don't have, some that have more, but you have a fairly large number of testers. Security people, I would say you have maybe one security person for every 10, 50, 100 testers. So the problem is a little bit more difficult because you cannot have a security person per team. And also, it's a really nasty world today. Because if you look, and by nasty I don't mean those people here who are trying to cheat on their partners. I mean the people who go into the database and leak all the data and try to extort people. Or those who took down Dyn in last October, and I think Twitter was down for several hours. I heard that the world ended. And also, there are many such occasions. Target was hit in 2013, I think, and a bunch of credit cards stolen. And even if you're just Netflix and you're saying, oh, we're just here to entertain people, then someone will try to get money out of you by saying, oh, I stole your, orange is the new black. So I stole the next episode and I will leak them out if you don't pay me. So you don't pay and they leak it out and you don't care, but still kind of annoying. And if any of you have been following the news like last Tuesday, I think that the FBI is now accusing Russia again, this time for hacking into the Qatari news feed and implanting them some news that probably caused some diplomatic issues. So basically, it doesn't matter where you go, there are security concerns and there are enough bad people outside, so you need to be, let's say, prepared, because if you don't, then the people really don't like you. I mean, come on, who gets hacked? Once something goes out in the news, everyone's reaction is like, oh, they must be horrible at what they're doing. How come that they don't prepare for that? So you don't really want to be in that way. But the problem is that security, usually when we think about security, it's about that guy here. It's that super expert who lives in the shadows. He's a genius. And in order to fight genius, you must be one yourself, or at least find some genius that will be on your side. And so what we mere mortals can do. And when you do finally encounter some sort of a security expert, he'll start spouting out all those words like, I don't know, ASLR and triple DES and CSRF, and what the hell are they talking about? It's really complicated. So if I don't even speak the lingo, how can I actually start? And it's a real bummer. Like, come on, what can we do? It's not only that bad. Sometimes there's some pieces of light that we can actually start and doing stuff. Because if in today's world, even if you do the most simple actions, they will have significant importance. Like, how many of you have tested an application that had no bugs? That was so thoroughly tested that you were having a hard time to find some basic problems? In most testers I've talked with, actually, the first 5 minutes are enough to find a problem. And if not, it's quite surprising. And the same goes for security as well. Because basically, no one knows about security enough. And if you just start to scratch the surface, then you're in a better position than most companies are. And also, when you get to some sort of practice in that, then getting deeper is really easy. So I'm here in order to help you uncover that first layer. I'm no security expert by no means, but I've learned just enough to be a little bit helpful, I hope. So what's threat modeling? There's some long definitions here. I really don't want you to read it because threat modeling is much more simple. It's basically a design review. Design review is something that we all do. The only difference is that it's a design review that is targeted to find security problems, security issues, or just stuff that we're worried about. And also, it's quite effective. Because when you go and you do a design review, you find problems that are hard to fix later, that are built firmly into your architecture, and you can deal with them early before you start and actually implement them, and then you say, oh God, what have I done? It will take me ages to rewrite that. And on a bright side, if you do that, it's also a great opportunity to educate the entire team about security issues. And just by having the entire team aware of security, you're improving your situation by a lot. So how do we actually do that? There are four basic steps, sorry. And the first one is to understand what's our scope. Because as in testing, there's way too much to test. If you go and try to secure everything from your network to your code, to your users' behavior, to the system admin, to the employees that you're hiring, you're not going to finish this review ever, and you will be way over your head. So the first thing is to know what you're dealing with. The second thing is get a model. I mean, how many of you can test without knowing anything about the software that you're working for? How many of you actually draw some stuff before you start just to get some sort of a feeling? When you have a model at hand, you have something to play with. So go and get one. And the other part is the fun part. That's where actually the work is being done. And that's when you get a bunch of people around. Hopefully they're the right people. And if they're not, it will be more fun. And then you just go and start saying, okay, what if? Let's discuss some of the ideas, and let's get to the point where we actually know what we care about and know what we're about to do. And finally, there's all this menial labor of logging our findings into our bug repository, finding a way to fix them, prioritizing all of those. But that's something that we already know how to do, isn't it? So let's start by scoping. The most important question is, what can you put a SEP field around? SEP field is somebody else's problem. It's from Douglas Adams. If it's someone else's problem, we don't have to care about it. If worrying about our hard disk deteriorating is a problem for the operation guys, or if we let Amazon take care of our servers, we don't care about that. If the network is being handled by a third party, we don't care. If we are in charge of only this one small component of the system, we don't really care about the rest of the system. We should care about the integration points, but everything else is, let's call it, above our paycheck. So let's not try to deal with things that we have no knowledge in. And also, it's kind of important to know who might want to attack me. Because, let's face it, most of us don't have the capability or money or time to defend themselves against the NSA or the Russian government or whomever it might be. And most of us don't really need to. Because if you are in a position where you need to defend yourself against a government agency, you must invest serious amount of resources that will take your business down. Unless, of course, you're another government agency and you have that sort of funding. But really, know who do you care about attacking you. If you're dealing with credit cards, probably you're being attacked by thieves, by people who want to get money. If you're a news agency, you might be attacked by, again, the various parties that are interested in influencing the news. If you just have your own personal blog, well, you might be interesting as a way to attack someone else, but no one really cares about what you do personally, most of the time. And also, know what you don't really want to protect. Like, most of the time, if I would say to you, I'm about to steal all of your data, you would be, oh no, please don't do that. But what if I were to say that to Wikipedia? Their data is public, so they don't really care about me taking it. They do care about me changing it, but not really that much. They have great mechanism to recover from that. So basically, I cannot do anything to their data. Also, one thing that is really important to remember, when you're looking for security problems, when you're doing threat modeling, you are not looking for solutions. It's really easy to get derailed to, oh, I know how to solve this problem. Don't. That's for the later stage. That's for actually when you wrap up the things. Right now, you want to focus on finding the problems. So don't let anyone around you get derailed into very technical, let's solve it issues. Then we get to the part of the model. And modeling basically is something that we do each and every day. We all have those software models in our mind. And each has their own preference. So if you're using, for example, I don't know, the architecture diagram that you just use for testing, it might be convenient for you. If you're using UMLs, then I feel for you, really, but you might use them as well. And there's also one sort of diagrams that we'll look at on further, which is the data flow diagram that I found that are really helpful for me. Also, did we mention before, knowing what you're protecting, then just compile a list of the things you care about, the assets, so they're called. And by going through that list, you'll just start seeing things as, oh, we have passwords and we don't protect them in any way. We keep them in clear text. Maybe that's a bad idea. And so create a model. It does help if this model is a physical thing that you can gather around, because then you actually get the sense of combine of shared understanding, and not everyone with their own somewhat twisted model about what the software is. Sorry. And then you get to the part of the brainstorm, where you basically divide those into two, or I divide those into two categories. One is for those who really don't like forms. The people who say, okay, I'm confident enough, I know what I'm doing, and let's just start shooting off until I feel we're done. Like in that case, you might just sit and say, okay, so here, problem, 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 and what do you say, what do you say, what do you say? Great. And or you might go with movie plotting, which is basically saying, okay, let's assume that, I don't know, that a super genius is attacking me, that they have unlimited resources, and they might drop off the ceiling at any moment. It's fun. It gets people inhibitions out and deals really well with a problem where people are saying, well, it might be a problem, only it's not that feasible. So it's a nice way to deal with that. And if you want something which is more structured, that gives you some basic level of confidence that you're done, you can look at that size, where you can go through regulations. If any of you is doing HIPAA or PCI, or I have no idea what else, those are usually some really good lists of do and don'ts that you might have. And you might go and read some attack taxonomies. There's the CWE, the CVE, the OWASP top 10, which is rather smallish. And if by looking, you can find some more. And you can just go and say, okay, so I'm building those attacker personas. The guy who is, I don't know, a kid who just downloaded a script and is now trying to see if it works on my site. So relatively easy. A person who's a little bit more, say, a hacktivist of a sort. And you go through them and, okay, what might each of them do? You might use a game such as this one. And all of those are really useful to kind of know what you're doing. Also, while we're at it and trying to figure out ways to come up with ideas for attack, it's really important that you get to know different kinds of attacks. Because some of them are really creative the first time you hear about them. And it's easier to imagine problems if you know similar problems. Like, how many here have heard about the off by one bug or off by one error? It's a really simple concept, and the first time you hear about it, it says like, ooh, that's actually happened to me a lot. And same goes with security issues. The first time you'll hear about cross-site request forgery, you'll say, okay, well, I have no idea what this means. Then someone says, okay, basically it means that someone is waiting you to log in and using the fact that you're logged in to attack you. Okay, great. And now I understand that, and now I can think about it. And so do learn about it. There are a huge amount of resources available. There's online webinars that are free. There are paid courses if you want to take some. If your company does invite that security person at the end, he'll give you this nice report with 2 critical items, 7 high, 15 medium bugs, and 3 low just because they can. Read those reports. They might be quite interesting, and you'll learn a lot from them. Okay, and back to the modeling part. One thing that I liked, again from the same book, is the Stride model. Stride model came from Microsoft, as far as I'm aware, and they're using it to some sort of categorize, or it's a framework to think about attack vectors. So Stride stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privileges. And those are all, or most of them are big words, so I've recruited the Looney Tunes to help us a little bit and understand what's that about. So spoofing is basically when you try to imposter to someone, saying, I am someone else. I am, in this case, I'm a duck, or I'm a rabbit. Rabbit, indeed. Tampering is when you go and change stuff maliciously, normally. Like this road over here, it's not really there. And repudiation, probably the most, I don't know, odd term, but it basically this, I did not do that, I'm completely innocent, and you cannot prove otherwise. I did not purchase this, I did not eat this bird, I am completely and perfectly innocent. And click. Okay. Information disclosure is when your privates are out. basically. Denial of service, usually when we think about it, we think about what's called a DDoS, a distributed denial of service, where all of a million bots are attacking a server. But anything that prevents a user from actually using our software, like a knot in his gun, is a denial of service. So we need to be aware of the different level of denial of service. I might take the plug out and then your server will be down. I might just lock your user and then this user has been denied of service unless they have an easy way to unlock it. So keep it in mind. And elevation of privilege is when you get some sort of a user perform activities that they are not allowed to do. If a regular user can do some administrative operations, then you're probably on this case. Okay, so that was how do we model, and those are the post actions that we won't really dwell on because they include just logging, fixing, and stuff like that. Now, important question is, okay, it's a really cool idea, now when do I do that? And if you're not doing that yet, then as you go back to your work, start doing it then. And it's most effective as all design reviews before you actually write the program. But even if you have something that's already written and ready-made, doing this sort of reverse engineering is really helpful because then you know also what kind of mistakes you've already made and you get to review the architecture that you're already using. So knowing your problems is most of the time preferable to not knowing that. So do keep it in mind, and when you go back to your work, go and threat model a bit. Now, all of this have been quite, I know, in the air and quite hard to understand, so I thought we might go through an example. And for this example, I've created a model of a bookstore. It sells books to people through the internet. And as you can see here, I didn't go into too much details. I have here my server. I have the customer somewhere. I don't care. It's blue, grayish. And I have my warehouse where I actually have all of the books. So not much of the details, but even from here, we can start having some sort of meaningful discussion about what's going on. I can see that the customer is sending data regarding to a purchase and getting data that is a receipt. Then, or at another time, we see that the shop is sending a delivery order to the warehouse and getting a confirmation for that. We at least know what the system is doing, and we did it with a fairly simple diagram. You don't have to cover everything, because then it will be messy. If you do feel the need for more details, you can just, as always, drill down. This one looks a little bit messier, but note that I just broke here the shop into the web server, the database, another process that handles data. Still, not that much of a detail, but it works. I also added here some useful information, like I have these trust boundaries here. I'm using those words so you can get accustomed to them. Trust boundaries are basically which process do I trust more and which do I trust less. I don't trust my user. I somewhat trust my warehouse, but it's still outside of my system, so I want to defend against it in some sort of way. I used colors here, so if anyone has difficulty seeing colors, I do apologize. But I'm using red to indicate that here I have important data. Here I have something sensitive. Yellow is less of a problem if it gets leaked, and I use blue for stuff that I don't really care about because reasons. And if you really care about it, you can find online some formal annotations of data, of how data flows, but I saw very little use of them. If you can understand it, if you can read it, if your team can read it, it's good enough. And obviously when I say drill down, I don't mean messy, because the previous one, it's a mess, it's painful to read. This one's actually something that we used in our own product, and it's doing something with regard to the reports, I think. And I want you just to notice that even though it has quite a lot of details, it's still relatively clean and easy to read and understand. So even if you drop some details, like you can notice that I did just one arrow instead of both, then it's okay, because having it clean and easy to read is much more important. So back to the first diagram. How do we apply, we mentioned stride before. How do we apply stride to this? Basically, we go and we start to look about data that crosses boundaries. Okay, data is those arrows, and crossing boundaries is those nice lines here. And then we ask for each interaction. Let's say, for example, spoofing. So spoofing is impersonating a person or a process or something. And is spoofing relevant when a customer is performing a purchase? So I might have got Dan's credit card and I might try to buy a book. In that case, I'm impersonating them. And should the shop protect itself? Probably, because returning money is not always fun. And can the shop, is spoofing relevant on the other way around? Probably it is. If I were to use DNS poisoning, again, a term, I could have a site that looks similar, has a similar address, for example, and when you would come to buy at my server, I would just steal your credit cards. So we do need to have some sort of protection mechanism against that. Once we've exhausted our ideas with spoofing, we go on and say, okay, is tampering relevant here? Can I change the price of the request that I'm sending? And so on and so forth. If you are having a hard time to come with ideas, that's when this game comes in. It's really nice. It's like a whole bunch of ideas on cards. You have this model around you. The game called Elevation of Privilege. There's a link at the end. I'll put it here like that. And it comes alongside with the same book with Adam Shostak's book. So it's really nice. It gives you ideas, and it gives you also some terms that you can learn later. So basically, that's what you do. You go and usually you have yourself, your developer, your product owner. If you have a security expert, by all means, do grab them. If you don't, just fill their place. And you have a healthy discussion about it. If you want to do some prep work and each one think of some ideas themselves, that's great, but you don't have to. And you'll notice that once you've started talking about issues, more ideas come. That's why it's really important not to do that alone. And finally, here's what the result sheet might look like. So again, for this store, I'd say, okay, so maybe someone could use an SQL injection on us, and because we don't validate the input that we're using. That's a concern. It's really high on our priority list. And we have some explanation about where and when it is. Or if we're presenting the credit card number back to the user, that's actually a problem because it violates the standard that we're supposed to use as an online credit card processing store. And our license might be taken away. So we might want to fix that. On the other hand, if we went through the last 3 audits without this coming up, maybe it's not that urgent. So we don't know. It's always very contextualized. I think that's it, basically. Because what I hope that you might have noticed during my talk is that none of the things I've said were very strange, were very security-ish. It's very similar to testing. It's very close to the way we're used to think of. The basic question that you're asking when you're doing threat modeling is, what could possibly go wrong? And that's basically what we do in testing as well. Only thing, when you say security around it, you get to sound way smarter than you actually are. So, if you want to read some more, there's some links here. This should be published, I think. And if you have questions, please do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and now is questions time. I will ask the first one. yesterday Alan mentioned that it's possible to relate all the testing activities with personal life activities. So can you give us any ideas how we can use threat modeling at our personal life?
Well, basically, threat modeling is about finding risks and then deciding what to do with them. So it does apply to software, but it applies just about to anything else in your life. So if you're about to meet your family, for example, and someone has a birthday or something like that, and you forgot to buy a present, then there's some sort of risk that you might insult them. So you note that, and now we know, okay, so I forgot. I can either run around in circles and try to find something. I might apologize later. But at least you're aware of the problems that you expect to be facing. And when something happens, you're less surprised. So when something doesn't happen, you're surprised in a good way. So why not?
Reminds me, it's my wedding anniversary next week.
Oh,
so thank you.
Enjoy.
Any questions?
So a lot of times we have different kinds of software development processes. You were talking about doing this in the design phase, but that it's never too late. But what if you have like a continuous delivery type of thing where there's changes all the time? Do you have any advice on how to deal with this kind of thing in a very fast-paced environment?
Well, yes, do it quick. Basically, even when you're doing continuous delivery and have multiple releases a day, each and every feature is undergoing some sort of a design phase. It doesn't have to be a very formal sign-off and stuff like that. But even if you're just writing a small feature, grab a piece of paper, draw a quick diagram on it, and sit with the developers doing that. Have a short chat, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour, whatever suits you, and discuss what are the problems that you have. It is helpful to pause, let's say, once a year or something like that, and try to rethink the whole picture. But if you're doing small features, do this per feature. And you're already designing stuff, so why not just include this one extra question of what security concerns do we have in this design phase? Doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes or an hour.
I do have a quick question.
Okay, but
So
you're the expert.
What? Yes, not really. What do you think is the biggest challenge to developing the thinking around security and threat modeling as a technique in development organizations that are slow to adopt or slow to start thinking about security? I mean, the game's helpful, but what other techniques could you suggest?
Well,
there?
basically, the main challenge, as you've mentioned, is that it takes time, and people are not very keen on investing time in things that they don't see the immediate benefit of. So one technique that I really like, I think it was yesterday in Like Talk, is start doing and see if somebody stops you. And because if you start and say, okay, look, I've invested a couple of hours of my time, I've did a sketch and came up with those problems, do we think those problems are important? If they're not important, then you know, okay, I'll sure have to try another way. But if you found something that people actually care about, you have a good case of starting to drive through a more, I'd say, widely accepted practice. So that's one way of doing that. Another way, if you are in a position where you have close access to the management people really like buzzwords. So if you can get a manager to sign off this declarative, everyone must do threat modeling at least once every quarter, then your coworkers might not really like you, but it will get done. Personally, I must say that my personal entry into this field was because working in a large organization, we had some internal processes, and we just had to do threat modeling for once a year. So there was no one else more suited than myself, and I started learning. And so even if you get to a point where people have to do stuff, they might learn from that. So I don't recommend this path because it's kind of choosing a conflict when you can do something better. But if you think it's really important and you have tried other ways without success, that might work as well.
Thank you. Any more?
Yeah, actually, I have a question. What do you think about outsourcing this kind of activity? And if we do outsourcing, at what time we have to start thinking of this? Is it something that we have a ready working product? Just ask someone to test it, or we have to do that while we design or do the requirements analysis?
Well, personally, I don't believe in outsourcing, not as a testing strategy, neither as a security strategy. If you want to hire some external experts to help you, by all means, do bring them in. You want this knowledge to be inside of your process. You want this knowledge to be part of your everyday work, because you are probably the most experienced person about your product. You're the most knowledgeable about it, and you have a better potential at finding problems than most security experts will have if they just hop in and drop for even a 3-month project. You are familiar with the internals of your application. You know it back and forth, and you might use the knowledge and the help that they provide. Having a security expert to walk you through the process is very helpful. They might ask all of the right questions, but the answers to those questions, you have them already. So I wouldn't recommend completely outsourcing it, only bringing some experts in, that's always helpful.
Maybe then just to describe the situation, I'm for the financial institution and we are outsourcing development also. Let's imagine the mobile application. So, and our point is that actually we have to bring the experts on doing that. We are not internally that strong. You need the knowledge, the conferences, all of this, and doing that once a year or whatever does not make sense to keep the security experts internally.
If you're outsourcing your development, then I would say it's some sort of a two-phased solution for you. I would, first of all, require the development team that I'm hiring to do those processes. Because if they're developing it, they know the software better than everyone else. And so you should get out of them some sort of evidence that they did it. And on top of that, every once in a while, which suits to you, you might want to have something which is more process-like, in which you'll look at your mobile application, your web application, and how is everything interconnected. And then again, we go back to the point where you're the expert, where you are the person who knows which system interacts with which, what types of data is going in between, and how it is protected when passing through systems. So you just have to layer your activity to match what you're doing. If someone else is developing the application, it should be good enough to your standards. If you are integrating a lot of stuff, then the integration part is your responsibility.
What's your experience in your company? You said that as soon as you do this exercise, after that it's somebody else's problem, or it's embedded in your development process somehow, that you flag the threats that you think are valid, and then it's up to, say, product owners or whoever own the product.
Well, basically, it's that. It's when we do this process, and it's a continuing process, it's never something that we just stop doing, then we find security concerns, and those that are easy to fix, we just fix. Those that require more work, we put in our backlog, and the product owner decides whether or not they should be mitigated and to what extent. So we treat it as you would treat any other bug, basically.
Anyone else?
Still working? Yes. I wonder about separation of activities. So you talk about threat modeling, and I tend to talk a lot about exploratory testing where we model. Why do you see that we should separate the activities instead of like combine activities and perspectives under one umbrella?
Well, basically, I think that separation is beneficial for me when I'm trying to focus on something. It's like choosing a charter or something like that. Also, when I give my activity the title of threat modeling, it's easier for me to incorporate the other team members in the work, the developers, the product owners, and so on. If I were to be saying security testing, then they would say, oh, you're a tester, go do that. And I really want their participation. So sometimes choosing the right words is helpful. So that's why I really like having that as a separate term. Even if the activity is, as you mentioned, really is the same.
More questions?
Anyone else?
So hi, if we want to start doing this, and you talk you could do it on the feature level or on the system level or whatever, what would be the best entry level to do this? Because I mean, as you see, security is often a combination of stuff that fails somewhere. So should it be better to apply it on a more system level thinking or down to the feature level, top down or bottom up?
I think
when you start doing it.
I think that the answer is you start at the level that you operate in. If you're working on a single feature, start with that feature. And if you're worried about integrating this feature to the system, think about that too. If you are a system architect, do by all means have an overview of everything. But like many other design reviews, you can do them at any level that you choose. So I would recommend to start with the level that you're more comfortable in. That's it. Start with a domain, don't stick to it.
Thank you. And now we can finish this session and have small break until Maret prepares. So thank you for participation and Amit.
Thank you. Thank you. Hold on a second.